In the heart of Europe, in Brussels, the roadmap to Armenia-EU relations was signed. More than 7 pages focusing on security, defense, economic diversification, namely new investments under the umbrella of the Global Gateway. Chairman of the Georgian think tank, GeoCase, offers a singular take on Armenia's chances of EU integration under the light of Georgia's step back. Mr. Kipiani, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for inviting.
Georgians mark a year of non-stop anti-government protest in Tbilisi. What's going on your end right now?
So to cut the story short, it's all about the big uncertainty, and that uncertainty is primarily due to the fact that the protests which we see on a regular basis, as you rightly mentioned, still is lacking the capacity to reach an overall objective and the goal of appointing step elections or considering or making the government consider on appointing the step elections. So the background is fine. It's very exciting, I have to say. But when it's about the practicalities of reaching the end result, again, as I'm saying, it's falling very short. On another side, it's about fragmentation of Georgian opposition landscape, and that fragmentation is not because of the fact and the reason that they cannot find a common agenda to unite around, but primarily because the public trust is breached, and voters are demanding for some fresh insight or fresh or new entrance into the opposition side. So that's second the key reason. And the last but not least, it's quite the ambivalent position of the Western partners, starting with the United States and ending up with EU. We see numerous statements, especially on the EU side, but those statements are to the point of creating an effect, but again, not producing a meaningful impact on Georgian developments. Again, I appreciate that the EU is a different animal and it has its own limit, its own capacity, and it can't go beyond those limits, but still, that probably, as I said, a very concise response to your question, uncertainty, and once again, uncertainty. But what is clear, at this point, Askik, that uncertainty is very much to the damage of the national security, of the reputational security, to the economic sustainability of Georgia. So, again, fingers crossed that at some point, rather sooner or later, an escape from that situation, from that deadlock could be found. And again, it would be very much dependent on the stimulus and on the stamina of the protesters in Tbilisi, of the civic society in the first place. And again, as I keep reiterating on reshaping the Georgian political landscape and finding a new fresh breath and new blood in a way. So that is in overall a snapshot analysis of the status quo.
Armenia and the EU adopted a new strategic agenda yesterday, signing basically a document that is the roadmap to integration. What are Armenia's chances with the EU in light of what you have just described, in light of Georgia's own backslide?
It's an excellent question. And I have to be very direct and very honest without beating around the bush when I made an outline of a bit gloomy situation here on the ground. One of possible exits, or I won't be saying a magic speed, but helpful leverages would be the developments in the region. And you just mentioned the very important milestone on the Armenian side about entrenching or solidifying the partnership bonds with EU. What's happening these days in the region, in Armenia, between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and in the different other the regards, we very much hope, and fingers crossed, that would have at least some the impact on the Georgian developments, because the region as such is very vibrant. It at the crossroads of at the juncture of the getting rid of Soviet legacy. And when speaking about an escape from Soviet legacy and turning the region into the sustainable geopolitical and geoeconomical actor, again, not to please you and not to exaggerate the meaninglessness of that document which has been signed and different other developments. But I think that all in all, that would produce very sizable the footprints on the Georgian side. So, of course, that gloomy picture, it's which sounded a bit pessimistic. I appreciate that, but it's not without any sort of, the light or bright side on the horizon. And one of those are what's happening in Armenia. Armenian being democratized, Armenian being the moving very steadily on the pro-European paths is one of those not just emotional hopes which Georgians are clinging to, but also very practicable leverages which would have and could hopefully have again a say on the Georgian side as well.
Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict has always been a leverage to keep both countries under Russian influence, if not control. After the NK conflict ended, the sides have moved towards slow but visible signals of reconciliation, largely due to the US administration's efforts. To untie a few more knots, Azerbaijani troops should withdraw from Armenian territories. A fair demarcation and delimitation will hopefully accomplish it. A final signing of the peace agreement, the retrieval of the prisoners of war, will inspire more trust to those who look to invest in the region, the global gateway. So you are basically implying that Armenia's possible successful integration could actually help Georgia turn backward towards the West. Am I correct in my argument?
Absolutely. For a few decades, Georgia has been the front runner in that process. Unfortunately, these days, we are, let's put it diplomatically, we're lagging behind. So someone has to take a lead. And thankfully, Armenia now, is taking that lead, which is so important, not just for Armenia, but for Georgia including.
What are the lessons that Armenia needs to learn from Georgia's progress with the EU and then the backslide for smooth transition, not to repeat the same story?
Probably two quick observations or two quick lessons or conclusions from my side. Always stay vigilant and never anything for granted. So those are Georgian lessons, if I may say, because for quite some time we believe that a point of no return to Soviet legacy or to all habits was passed. But again, as I said, it's a constant and non-stoppable fight for democracy, non-stoppable fight for for transparency, for state building, for capacity building, for institutional capacity building. So I think, it's a never-ending process, especially when it comes to Georgia, to Armenia, countries which are such would always be in that constant fight for their not just physical survival, but for proving to themselves and to the entire world that they're competitive states and they have their right to exist and right to develop and right to have their unique voice and place in the world to emerge.
The bigger determining factor, I think, will be manifested when the war in Ukraine ends. Russia will clearly try to restore its influence in South Caucasus, and considering Armenia's over-dependence on the Russian economy and the gas supply, two scenarios are possible. Either the Armenian government gives in under significant pressure and steps back, or a deal with the Kremlin is reached. What do you believe would be the acceptable deal with the Kremlin so that Armenia is allowed, so to speak, to go into the embrace of the EU?
Lastly, you rightly mentioned the Ukrainian war and all that political fuss. I'm still a bit constrained to say diplomacy because it's a bit chaotic. What we see now on the political side of the Ukrainian war, so it's a bit of fuss and tackling back and forth. Nevertheless, what we see on the Ukrainian example, which would have and will have a direct impact on the South Caucasus, it's about Russian posture in the former Soviet Union. Regretfully enough, and I also should be very candid, very honest, what we see in this world of complete disorder, that the mighty powers still try to position themselves in the optics of the Vienna Congress about dividing the zones of influences. And that's very important, especially for small compact states like Georgia and Armenia, because big guys, again, are tempted to make a deal over sort of dividing the zones of influences. And unfortunately, the same Western camp, which we see these days, is very much inclined to behave in the same pattern. Of course, I'm not the sort of, confusing and throwing into the same the basket the signature or the signature of Trump's administration or by Putin's regime or by Xi Jinping, but nevertheless, that's the tendency, something we have to be aware of. In that respect, of course, to get back to your question, when I mentioned the sustainability, competitiveness, and modernizing, not just those things or those Armenia is strongly evolving into techno hub. The contact with NVIDIA, which is not just about Armenia's story, but it's about South Caucasian story, and how that story could be plugged into not any less vibrant Georgian IT sector. And how then we could think of, or official Baku could also think of plugging in with digital infrastructure. It's again about viability, competitiveness, and a modern face of the Southern Caucasus. As I keep saying, South Caucasus, which is facing historical moments of getting rid with that very negative connotations, which we've been experiencing for quite some time. So it's time to make a qualitative jump. And I think, with Armenia taking that very honorable lead and very painful lead, I have to say, and with contribution by Georgia and again welcoming the sort of negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, we're finally getting closer to sort of, to putting the South Caucasus on the world map as a competitive geostrategical hub. And that is a unique opportunity, that the historical window which opens, probably once in decades or sometimes even once in centuries. So it's up to us to show that political maturity, to be up to the times and make that very necessary breakthrough we all are longing for.
I hear you're starting a political party. Would you please give details about this? What will the mission of the party be? What will the vision be? And what's the share of the Georgian voters' pie, so to speak, that you're hoping to obtain?
Thank you for your interest in the initiative, which I, with my colleagues, have embarked on. It's not a political party yet, but of course it has a way we claim to be a more active stakeholder in Georgian political process. So we'll see how the formality will develop. As for the content, which I also emphasize is much more important than the status is. It's the different side or different type of Georgian politics, which is void of sentiments, which is not void of personification, which is about seeing or discerning all, let's say, all shades of the Georgian politics. So it's about the practicalities of reaching objectives as less costly, as with more practicable tools as it is realistically possible. So again, less personification, less ideology, less methodology, I have to say, but more practicability. So what we claim to see, what we claim to understand, and to educate the Georgian audience, that the coin has always has two sides. For some time, Georgian politics was about either black or white. This is quite a difficult mission. I must mention it's not just about Georgian temperament, but I think that Armenian audience could well hear me, what I'm all about. But I think that is again getting to the next level of Georgian political maturity. So it's a long way to go. But I think that that approach, that the offer has its own and will have its own place on the Georgian political landscape.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Astik. Thank you so much.
Armenia is diving deeper in Western waters, a risky turn of events. But does it really have an alternative?